It's been 9 days since free agency officially opened, and we still have a bunch of quarterback questions around the NFL. Let's talk about that and much more that happened here on Tuesday around the NFL. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Wednesday, March 19 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. The NFL offseason still going on, still in full swing, of course. Very soon, we're going to start talking more and more about the NFL draft, which is a little over a month away, but free agency officially kicked off about 9 days ago with the legal tampering period. And the way things are going with the quarterback market, like I had one executive tell me, this feels like MLB free agency where it's taking way too long. Usually, top players, they're off the board after a couple of hours, max a day or two. But here we are. Aaron Rodgers still out there. Russell Wilson still out there. There's this Kirk Cousins situation in Atlanta, which is still brewing. Let's talk about all of it over here today, as well as some other things that happened around the NFL over here on Tuesday. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? How are you doing here today?
I'm doing well, Ari. Yeah, let's go ahead and start with what you were just teasing there. The veteran quarterback market. There's teams out there right now that don't have a starting quarterback. There's teams out there right now that are going to be looking for a quarterback in the draft, but still are going to want somebody who could be that bridge quarterback. Maybe it's a Justin Fields type. But like you said, we've got big name guys out there. Rodgers, Wilson, James Winston, Joe Flacco. The situation that's going on there in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins and whether they're actually going to ever let him go in free agency, because I don't think anybody's trying to trade for that contract. But the biggest thing I imagine here right now is what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. We heard Cam Hayward speak a little bit about the team being, quote unquote, like held hostage with it's like just decide what you want to do. Is that really what you're gauging is the holdup right now in this veteran quarterback market?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I don't think anybody truly knows what Aaron Rodgers is thinking. So to try to say what he's thinking and what he's trying to do over here would be irresponsible. But people around the NFL are trying to figure out what is going on over here because he is the big quarterback holdup right now out there with I look around the NFL, there's teams like the Giants who need to figure this out. The Steelers have to figure this out. There's a team like the Browns, who, of course, will not have Deshaun Watson this year because of the Achilles injury. The Titans are picking number one. They have not really signed anybody there to be with Will Levis. I think there's growing belief that they really like Cam Ward at number one. But you look around the NFL, there are all these teams over here that need to figure out their quarterback situations. Minnesota, of course, has J.J. McCarthy, and they're kind of lurking as a potential team over here for Aaron Rodgers. But until Aaron decides, we're really unlikely, I would say, to have movement with Russell Wilson or a Kirk Cousins, who we'll get to over here in a second. The teams who have been interested in Rodgers, it's well known. The Giants, who had interest in all the quarterbacks here so far this offseason, they wanted Stafford. They failed in that. They pivoted over here to Aaron Rodgers, and they're waiting on him. There's the Steelers out there, and we saw what Cam Hayward said. It's like, I'm not doing no darkness retreat. I'm not going to do a whole recruiting tour over here. If you want to join the Steelers, join us. If not, it's fine. And of course, there's the Minnesota Vikings. And I want to go through all three situations here quickly because each one is very unique for where Rodgers decides to end up going. I don't think he retires. I think that's been made clear around the NFL. When he had his exit meeting with the Jets, new GM Darren Muji, new head coach Aaron Glenn, he made it pretty clear that he wants to play in 2025. So we're going to stick with him playing over here. But each situation is interesting because the Steelers situation, we know about it. Mike Tomlin, every year, he's been there forever. Winning record, make the playoffs, but they've struggled to get to the mountaintop. They've struggled to win playoff games. It's been a while. So their idea is, Aaron, come join us on this veteran roster who's going to win, 9, 10, 11 games, help us out over here and get us over the hump, because these last few years they've been working with, Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and last year was Wilson and Fields, and it's just not getting us there. So you join us, join TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. Obviously, they now get DK Metcalf, who's going to be there, at least for now, with George Pickens. Enjoy this offense over here and this defense where we every year are competitive, and you'll be joining us over here and trying to take us over the hump. The Giants situation, and they really want him because Joe Shane, the head coach, the GM, head coach Brian Daboll, they know that they are on the hot seat going into this year. So they really have to win this year to keep their jobs. But their situation is kind of similar to the Jets a little bit when Rodgers went over there, where it's a bunch of young players and they're ready to take that next step. I mean, you look at the roster and what they have over there. I mean, defensively with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and, Bobby Okereke, and the secondary, they signed Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, Deontay Binks, and Newbin, the second round pick from last year. Offensively, you pair up with Malik Neighbors. He becomes your Garrett Wilson when you had him with the Jets. It's more about, we have all these young guys. They really have not won in their career. You've won. Join us over here and, get us over the hump over here and get us to the playoffs. That's the idea of the Giants. And the Vikings, of course, is the most attractive situation. But to this point, they have not been willing to put their foot forward and say, we're going to go after this. And the reason is JJ is there right now by himself as the only quarterback. I think Brett Rippon is also on the roster, but JJ is the main guy there right now. He, of course, missed all of last year, meniscus surgery, meniscus cleanup, had all of it. He also had a situation throughout the year, which he lost some weight. There was some other stuff that were happening in the building. And there are questions about, are we really, really ready to just hand the keys over to him with no competition? So the idea of bringing a different veteran quarterback like Daniel Jones, who went to Indy, or bringing a Joe Flacco type, that would make more sense, because it's like, you're going to be the quarterback, but there's somebody behind you. If you bring Aaron Rodgers into the mix, you're basically announcing that you're going to sit JJ McCarthy now for a second year, because Aaron's not going there to compete with JJ. He's coming in to be the guy. And that's really the holdup over here, I would imagine, with the Vikings about, are we going to do this or are we not going to do this? Because if we go after Rodgers, he's the guy and JJ is sitting over here another year. This time, of course, he'll actually be healthy. After last year, he was not healthy. So if I had a guess, and I guess this is a guess because I don't think anyone knows exactly what Rodgers is thinking, but if he got to pick from these three teams, he probably would pick Minnesota with that team and that head coach. He knows Kevin O'Connell. They're both California guys. They have a relationship in the past. They've known each other from the off seasons. They both came into the NFL around the same time as quarterbacks. And of course, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, DJ Hawkinson. There's good offensive tackles in that team. It's a team that won 14 games last year. So if I had to guess, I think he would love to go to Minnesota and be the quarterback for at least a year over there. But to this point, Minnesota has not stepped forward. But like I said a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago, or last week, whenever it was, Minnesota is planning on adding a veteran quarterback at some point. The question becomes, is it a guy to be the starter, or is it a guy just to push and compete with JJ McCarthy this year? So that is kind of the situation of here when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. We'll talk about the other quarterbacks here in a second, but we're kind of waiting for Rodgers over here, and he'll go on his pace. We know that from history. So this might take some time. It might happen tonight. It might happen tomorrow. We really don't know. And so far, we have simply not heard from him to this point.
Well, let's go ahead and get into those other guys here, because like you said, we've got Russell Wilson out there, Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco. Some of them have been taking meetings. Some of them are still kind of in that feeling out process, and some of the meetings might be real, some might not be. We've touched a little bit on that with Russell Wilson and his history going all the way back to last offseason. What's next for these guys? Is it really just waiting on Rodgers and then seeing where they fit into the scheme? Or is there are they looking at backup roles?
It's interesting. I think from all the quarterbacks out there, I mean, again, we mentioned all the chairs that are kind of open over here. We'll talk more about the draft over here in the coming weeks. But right now, at least every team has a different forecast for the quarterbacks in the draft. I think everyone agrees to this point, or most people would agree, Cam Ward is QB1, and he has a really good shot of going at number one, whether it's to Tennessee or a different team. But after that, there's big question marks with all the quarterbacks, and that's why the veteran market is still a focus of here. So Russell Wilson met with the Giants, met with the Browns. The Browns are an interesting team because they really can't – I don't see them being a team that's going to pay big money for a quarterback over here. We'll talk about Kirk Cousins here in a second, but I don't see them being a team that's going to sign a quarterback to 1 year and $30 million. Not what they're going to do, especially with that Deshaun Watson contract still there for the team. But they are out there. They met with Russell. It was a good meeting. The Giants also met with him. But I would say the Giants option number one is Aaron Rodgers. And after that, you have a Jameis Winston, a Joe Flacco. They're still out there. Winston took a meeting with the Giants. That meeting has ended. They're not going to sign him right now. until they get clarity on Rodgers. Same thing with Flacco. He also met with the Giants. No decision on him until they figure out Rodgers. But those guys are also waiting over here to figure out, are we going to be a bridge guy? Are we going to be a backup guy? Is there any scenario in the world where we're able to sign as the starter? I would say that is very, very, very unlikely. For Jameis, I don't see him going back to the Browns. I think those days are over from my understanding. There are other teams around the NFL who are interested in Jameis as a primary backup quarterback. And he's received interest from a number of teams. No visits would be necessary for those, from my understanding. But that is one where if he wants to sign right now with a team that has a starting quarterback and he'll be the direct backup number 2 and get good backup money, he has it right now. But he's waiting for all of this to kind of fall into place before deciding. So that's where it all stands over here. Everyone is waiting on Rodgers. Technically, Cleveland, if they want to go after Russell Wilson, they could and just sign him, because I don't think they're in the Rodgers market. The other thing about Wilson that I'll mention, I don't think it's really been reported much, but his start in Pittsburgh last year was incredible. When he took over for Justin Fields, they were winning, they were scoring. I mean, there was that game against the Bengals, which was a high-scoring game, and he outdueled Joe Burrow after throwing an early pick-6 in that game, I remember. But he had really a good start. As the year went on, the relationship, especially with Arthur Smith and also with Mike Tomlin to an extent, it just, something happened there. I'm not sure what it was, but something got a bit sour, which is the reason why I do believe the Steelers wanted to re-sign Justin Fields, and he went to the Jets, and now they're trying to get Rodgers, and they're not really interested in Russell Wilson anymore. So I think his days in Pittsburgh is also likely over, unless Pittsburgh some way somehow just strikes out on everybody and gets stuck over here. So I would say right now that his chance of going back to Pittsburgh is also very, very low.
All right, one more guy I want to get to that is currently not available as a free agent, and that being Kirk Cousins. What are we looking at for him? Is he really just going to sit there behind Penix this upcoming season and just twirl his thumbs?
So I'm going to admit this, because I know I said this on the show a couple months ago when he was benched. I said he's guaranteed to get released. There's no way in the world they're actually going to keep him. Their GM, Terry Fontenot, at the combine said, yeah, we're okay holding him as a backup of year for $27.5 million. What I could tell you right now is that the Falcons have been actively trying to trade Kirk Cousins. But again, similar to the Russell Wilson situation, all the other quarterbacks, they're kind of waiting on Aaron Rodgers right now. So that is where things stand right now. I would say I'm a little bit surprised they have not released him outright. And I did look through the contract again, and it kind of makes a little bit more sense to me as to why they haven't released him yet. He already has been paid over $60 million in year one of that contract. I think it was $62.5 million. He made that in 2024. In 2025, he is scheduled to make $27.5 million. Every single dollar is guaranteed, whether he's cut or traded or whatever. He's making that money. On Sunday or Saturday, he had an additional $10 million for 2026, next year. That also becomes guaranteed. And the Falcons could have released him and make sure it doesn't trigger, but that date happened. He was still on the roster. So in total, Kirk Cousins has already made now $100 million from the Atlanta Falcons. 62.5 in year one. He's making $27.5 million this year. And then there's $10 million in 2026 that already has triggered a year because he was on the roster on Sunday. From the Falcons' perspective, the reason they're holding on to him is because he's anyways making that money this year, $27.5 million. Why release him and let another team sign him for the minimum? Let's have all this, quarterback dominoes fall over here, and they believe eventually there's going to be a team over here that is sitting without a quarterback, and will approach them and say, hey, we're going to trade for Kirk Cousins. We're going to take on some of the money. You take on some of the money as well. We're going to split it or whatever, and we'll give you back a draft pick. And basically the Falcons are buying a draft pick because they're anyways paying Kirk Cousins this year. So I think that is their vision over here. Kirk Cousins did meet with the owner, Arthur Blank, a few weeks ago and told him, listen, I know it just didn't work out over here. It was a difficult year. I was coming back from the Achilles injury. I wasn't fully myself. I would appreciate if you guys move on from me, release me, give me a starting job somewhere else. Arthur essentially said that we're going to do what is best for the Atlanta Falcons over here. So right now, the best thing for them in their eyes is to hold on to Kirk and try to see where this quarterback market falls. And eventually, whether it's Cleveland, who has his former quarterbacks coach and Kevin Stefanski, he was in Minnesota for a long time. Maybe they go after him and they pay him some of the money that is owed this year. Or it's a different team like Pittsburgh if they strike out, or the Giants if they're striking out, or whatever. So that is kind of what the Falcons are waiting for. But I feel pretty confident in saying it's unlikely they're going to go into this season with Kirk Cousins as the backup quarterback to Michael Penix. I think that makes the situation very uncomfortable. If Michael Penix starts the year struggling, there's going to be the chatter about let's bring in Kirk Cousins. You want to have Kirk out of the building somewhere else, and they're going to try to trade him. And then they're going to bring in a different backup quarterback, somebody who is made to be a backup quarterback, making backup quarterback money. It would not affect Michael Penix and how he starts his year of year as a full-time starter. So basically, putting all of this together, tying everything we've spoken about together, this all comes back to Aaron Rodgers. We need an Aaron decision first. Whenever that happens, I think we're going to have more quarterback movement. There is also a situation, and I have to say this because it's so fluid. If a team just gets so sick and tired of Aaron and they're like, you know what, the hell with this, move on from him and let's go pivot and sign Russell or trade for Kirk or whatever. So that option is also out there. But for now, to this point, 9 days in, those teams are still waiting on Aaron. And to this point, again, nothing has happened.
All right, moving on. Let's not talk about quarterbacks here for a moment and say goodbye to a player who gets to go out on top. It's a nice feeling, I'm sure. Brandon Graham is hanging up his cleats after 15 seasons, all with the Philadelphia Eagles. The recently minted two-time Super Bowl champion expressed during the season this would be his final go. Torn triceps, and those comments kind of made people wonder whether he was still going to retire. Well, he's able to defy the odds. He came back for the Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl, apparently tore them more, which is just absolutely insane to think about. And now he gets to ride off into the sunset as the two-time Super Bowl champion. I am applauding this guy for an incredible career. He only made one Pro Bowl, which is still shocking to me, but he was a guy who went out there, 76.5 sacks, and was obviously crucial and very important to that Philadelphia fan base. So my question for you, Ari, is just what is going to be your lasting memory of Brandon Graham's career?
I mean, first of all, definitely a Philadelphia sports icon there for, first of all, being there for 15 years. I mean, it's really hard to be a one team in your entire career athlete. Like, it's not something that happens always. Like Kobe with the Lakers, Jeter with the Yankees. You think of Eli Manning and Ray Lewis and Michael Strahan. Like, it doesn't happen often where the greats are able to do it. And it's even better when you're able to go out on top and retire from the NFL. Graham got to do it. Strahan got to do it with the Giants. Ray Lewis got to do it with the Ravens. Andrew Whitworth with the Rams. Like, it doesn't happen all the time when you're a really, really good player, great player, and you finish your career winning the Super Bowl with everything so perfect. So it's obviously great for Brandon Graham. And it's another loss over here for the Eagles, who they I mean, it's unbelievable how well they drafted back in the 2010s, 2011, like those years where they were able to draft Brandon Graham in 2010. He spent his entire career with the Eagles till 2024. Jason Kelsey, of course, drafted in 2011, spends his entire career with the Eagles until last year. Fletcher Cox, drafted in 2012, spends his entire career with the Eagles. And then there's Lane Johnson, who was drafted in 2013. And of course, he is still going strong. He just got a 1-year extension over here the other day. But those were the big four players over here on the Eagles' trenches, offensive line, defensive line, and they were the faces of the team. And of course, 3 of them have now announced their retirement. And like I said, Lane is still going very strong. But Brandon Graham, great player, trash talker, guy off the edge, who over the years started off, I would say, a little bit slow and eventually really worked his way up. He mentioned in his press conference over here yesterday, he gave some credit to Jim Schwartz, who came in as the Eagles defensive coordinator back in 2015 or 2016, as really elevating his game as well. And of course, he made that enormous play in their first Super Bowl in franchise history with the strip sack of Tom Brady in that game. It was a 5-point game during that point when that strip sack happened. Tom could have went down the field, got in a touchdown, put the Patriots ahead with under 2 minutes remaining in the game. comes around the corner, beats Shaq Mason. I think it was actually playing inside on that play, a very unique thing by Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator that year. And he beats Shaq Mason, gets to Tom Brady, strip sack, and of course, the rest is history over there with the Eagles winning their first Super Bowl. And of course, this year, he made it clear before this, when last season ended, after they lost to Tampa Bay, that he's coming back for one more year, and this will be his farewell tour. But we know he tore his triceps during this season. It was deemed a season-ending injury, and he made the return for the Super Bowl versus the Chiefs in that dominant win. And yes, Ben, he did confirm in the press conference over here yesterday that he did re-tear the triceps in the game. He did not know about it in the game, played through it, and of course, the next day he does, the testing and whatever, and it shows that he retore it. So he mentioned in the press conference that I will be taking care of my body over here moving forward and actually giving it the proper rest this time instead of rushing back to play, of course, now that he is retired. But an unbelievable career for Brandon Graham. He did do some TV over here last year, was on ESPN, I believe. So we might see him on the media side in our world over here in the near future.
Well, and you know all about playing injured because I know you busted your hand the other day and you still showed up for the record. I was honestly impressed. I was like, man, he's playing injured. That's our Ari Meirov.
That is true. Thankfully, I don't talk through my hand. I talk through my mouth. So that definitely helped out a lot. But that is true. That is true, Ben. That is true.
Fair enough. All right, let's go ahead and talk about a signing because things have slowed down as we've already spoken about. But Garrett Bradbury, things moving quick for him. He was cut on Monday by the Vikings. The 6-year starter from Minnesota already agreed to a 2-year deal with the Patriots on Tuesday. So very short lifespan of free agency for him. The deal's for 2 years, $12 million, but it only includes $3.8 million guaranteed. This move certainly helps Drake May with a solid veteran there on the line. So I'm curious. This move, it's obviously not the biggest offensive lineman move. It's not the biggest. It's not the sexiest. But I do think that it probably lends a little bit of an idea as to what we should expect from the Patriots in the upcoming draft. And I'm curious is what your thoughts are as to what the vision for this 2025 Patriots team is going to be. Because it seems like they're still trying to go out there and build around May, but at the same time also not going out there and reaching for the stars with some of the players.
The Patriots roster construction is still ongoing. And we mentioned it last week. They released David Andrews after 10 years with the team. I think he could definitely be somebody who retires. So they had that open hole over there in the middle of the offensive line at center. And there were some guys on the team that maybe we could roll with them, but it was like, that's probably not a good idea. And Bradbury gets released by the Vikings. They sign Ryan Kelly to be their new center. So they move on from him because his primary position is center. He can't really play guard. They move on from him. Former first-round pick. Had some moments, was shaky a lot over there in Minnesota. Part of the reason why they move on from him. But it's interesting because when you look at the free agent center market, we have a tracker up at the 3013.com. Every single center that I had on the list has been signed already, aside from David Andrews. I mean, Drew Dahlman, Josh Myers, Bradley Bozeman, Robert Hainsey, Ryan Kelly, Coleman Shelton, Evan Brown, Will Clapp, one of the great names in the NFL. Every single one was signed. So the Patriots' option in the veteran market was really not there. And of course, Bradbury gets released. They signed him. He'll be the tentative option right now at center to start the year over here, unless they draft somebody over here in the draft in some point, second round, third round, or whatever, to compete. Because like you said, only $3.8 million is guaranteed over here in this contract. But the Patriots, I mean, they still have a lot of work to do over here. I mean, they worked really, really hard on the defense in free agency. Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, Robert Spillane, Harold Landry, and on and on and on. But the offensive line, they were in on Dan Moore at left tackle, got too expensive. Jalen Moore, they were willing to go to 14, 15. KC went to 15, winning environment. I'm going to go over there. Those are really the two left tackle options. Left tackle is still wide open there. And of course, having somebody to protect the blind side for Drake May is pretty important, I would say. So you look right now, they have the number 4 overall pick in the draft. There are some left tackles still available over here in free agency, like a Cam Robinson. Do they look at him maybe to bring him in? Jedrick Wills, the former first-round pick in Cleveland. I don't get the sense that he's going to sign anytime soon. Coming off a major knee injury, I don't see that being an option over here. So the options are pretty limited when it comes to the free agent market. And picking at number 4, you have Will Campbell in this draft from LSU, who Some people view as a guard, some people view as a tackle. The arms is a bit of a concern. So that's going to be a question out there as well with him. But they're going to have to address it at some point. Then at the receiver position, Ben, they're not done over there. Like they have to figure something out over there. They were in on Chris Godwin. They were willing to offer him $30 million per year. Chris said no and went back to Tampa Bay at $22 million per year. Going back to last year, they were in on Calvin Ridley. They were in on Brandon Ayuk with the most money offered to him, and he said no. So they've been looking for that number one receiver for a while. They did not have much interest in DK Metcalf, so that was not really an option for them for whatever reason. But they're going to have to find somebody at receiver as well over here, whether that's doing a trade or whatever. So far, the only free agent addition that's notable by them at that position has been Mac Hollins from Buffalo on a 2-year deal, not worth any significant money, $7 million or whatever it was. So they're going to have to do something over there as well. But this is going to be a year over here in New England with new head coach Mike Vrabel, where it's about setting the culture, bringing the toughness and the grit. Josh McDaniels is back at OC. You have Terrell Williams, who is a defensive line type of a guy, all about grit, coming over from Detroit, previously in Tennessee. With Mike Vrabel, they're going to be very, very aggressive and gritty over there in New England. It's about setting the culture, but they're nowhere close to finishing up this roster. There's still a lot of work to do over here. I haven't seen the updated salary cap numbers, but I think they're still very much near the top of the NFL. So they're going to make more moves over here, whether it's in free agency and the draft and trade market as well. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about them, but they still have a lot of work over here to do with this roster. They did some of it, but there's a lot more to do as well.
Rookie quarterbacks, they help the numbers. All right. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on audio, go over there, hit subscribe. Sub in 2 places. It's great. That's all I got, Ari.
It's free. It's free.
Subscribe. Free. This is true.
Yeah. That's important to mention as well, Ben. Some people don't want to pay. So it's free to subscribe, YouTube, wherever you do. We really appreciate it. Like the video, do what you got to do. And we will be back here tomorrow morning for our Thursday edition of the NFL Spotlight Show, talking more about what's going on around the NFL. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you all over here tomorrow morning.